The first pope, the untold story of St. Peter. Did he really die in Rome? St. Peter's hidden tomb and the Vatican's greatest hidden mystery, Rome, 64 AD. The city is burning, Nero fiddles, Christians scream, and somewhere in the chaos, a fisherman from Galilee is about to become the most mysterious martyr in history. But wait, did St. Peter really die in Rome? How did a humble fisherman become the rock of the church? Why do two different sets of bones claim to be his? What secrets lie buried beneath the Basilica? And who, yes, who, put the bones of the first pope in a Vatican cupboard for decades? This is not just a story of faith. It's a tale of fire, forgery, forgotten relics, and forensic frustration. From the shores of Lake Tiberias to the marble halls of the Vatican, we follow the journey of the man who held the keys to heaven, and whose bones may still be playing hide-and-seek with history. Was Peter crucified upside down in Nero's Circus? Or did he escape Rome, only to return and meet his fate on a hill between two ancient pyramids? Why did medieval popes move his bones like chess pieces across Rome? And what does a 20th century archaeologist, a red-painted wall, and a box in a cupboard have to do with solving a 2,000-year-old mystery? This is the rock, the relic, and the Roman riddle. A story of popes, politics, and the most sacred real estate on earth. Let's start with Simon. Not Simon Cowell. Simon the fisherman. He lived in Bethsaida, a sleepy lakeside village where the fish were fresh and the politics were Roman. One day, while casting nets and probably grumbling about taxes, Simon met a man named Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You're Peter now, and on this rock I will build my church." Boom. Promotion. From fish slinger to spiritual cornerstone. Peter became the leader of the apostles, the spokesperson of the Messiah, and eventually the first pope. He was impulsive, loyal, and famously bad at keeping secrets. See denying Jesus 3 times before breakfast. But Jesus saw something in him. A rock. Not Dwayne Johnson. A foundation. Jesus didn't just give Peter a nickname. He gave him the keys. Not metaphorical keys. Literal keys. To heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, Jesus said. Translation: Peter could forgive sins, judge souls, and basically run the celestial front desk. This made Peter the spiritual gatekeeper, the doorman of paradise, the bouncer of the beatific vision. And for the church, this meant something huge. Peter wasn't just a disciple, he was the first bishop of Rome. And that made Rome the capital of Christianity. Fast forward a few centuries, Emperor Constantine, fresh off his conversion and eager to impress Jesus, builds a basilica on what was allegedly Peter's burial site. This wasn't just any church, it was a theological skyscraper. Over time, it evolved into the Renaissance masterpiece we know today, St. Peter's Basilica. It's got everything. A dome taller than your average medieval ego, a canopy the size of a 10-story building, a pulpit that screams papal power louder than a Gregorian chant, and beneath all that grandeur, a crypt, a tomb, a mystery. In the 1940s, Vatican archaeologists, armed with trowels, prayers, and probably a few espresso shots, dug beneath the basilica. What they found was a 2nd-century funerary monument and eventually bones, human bones, in a box, with the name Peter scratched nearby. Cue the theological fireworks. Were these the bones of St. Peter? The Vatican said yes. Skeptics said, "Hold my relic." The bones weren't carbon-dated, and they weren't complete. But for the Church, they were sacred proof of apostolic continuity. And in 2013, Pope Francis held them aloft like Simba in The Lion King, showing the world the relics of the first pope. Plot twist. In 2014, during renovations at the humble Church of Santa Maria in Capella, 3 kilometers from the Vatican, workers found 2 ancient terracotta urns. On the lid, the names of early popes, including Peter. Inside, more bones. Massimiliano Faridi, a nobleman with a name fit for a Renaissance opera, was stunned. Petrus, the lid read. Could these be the bones? If so, who's buried under the basilica? A decoy? A theological stunt double? Faridi wanted the bones analyzed. Carbon dating, DNA testing, the works. But the Vatican said, nope, vetoed, denied, blocked faster than a heretic at a papal Twitter feed. Why? Because if these bones were Peter's, then the Vatican's entire claim to apostolic succession might be built on the wrong skeleton. And that, my friend, is what we call a relic-related identity crisis. Meanwhile, back in Israel, archaeologists were trying to find Peter's hometown, Bethsaida. The Bible says it was near Lake Tiberias. But for centuries, it was like Atlantis. Everyone talked about it, but no one could find it. In the 1980s, a site called Et Tel was excavated. They found fishing gear, Roman-era homes. It looked promising. But it was 2 kilometers from the lake, and Bethsaida literally means house of the fisherman. So, shouldn't it be on the lake? Enter Mordechai Aviam, the Indiana Jones of Galilee. He started digging at El Araj, much closer to the shore. What did he find? A Roman bathhouse, marble fragments, Byzantine church ruins, and a chancel screen that matched descriptions from an 8th century pilgrim named Willibald. It was like finding Peter's Airbnb, the birthplace of 3 apostles, the lost city of Bethsaida, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of Peter's journey from fisherman to pope. Before Peter was the gatekeeper of heaven, he was just Simon, a Galilean fisherman with a strong accent and a knack for impulsive decisions. He lived in Bethsaida, a village so elusive it makes Atlantis look like a tourist trap. The Bible says Peter, Andrew, and Philip all hailed from this lakeside town, but for centuries archaeologists couldn't find it. Then came the summer of 2018. Mordechai Aviam, the Indiana Jones of Israel, unearthed a carved stone reliquary near Lake Tiberias. It had 3 compartments. 3! Like a divine lunchbox for apostles. Peter, Philip, and Andrew, each with their own sacred cubby. "This is it," Aviam declared, probably with dramatic music playing in the background. A Roman bathhouse, a Byzantine church, and now a reliquary? That's the archaeological trifecta. But what relics were kept inside? Bones? Sandals? Peter's fishing license? We don't know yet. But the faithful in the Holy Land couldn't exactly hop on a pilgrimage to Rome, so local relics, anything remotely touched by Peter, were spiritual gold. 3 years after meeting Jesus, Peter found himself in Jerusalem, standing outside the house of Caiaphas, the high priest. Inside, Jesus was being judged. Outside, Peter was being questioned by a few nosy women who recognized his Galilean accent. "You were with him," they said. "I don't know the man," Peter replied. 3 times. And then the rooster crowed. Cue the guilt, cue the tears, cue the centuries of theological debate. Peter's denial wasn't just a betrayal, it was a mirror. A reminder that even the rock of the church had cracks. And that's why Christians love him. He failed, he wept, he came back stronger. After Jesus' death, Peter didn't retire to a quiet life of fishing and regret. He became the CEO of Christianity, Inc. Within 30 years, the faith spread across the Mediterranean like wildfire. And where did Peter go? According to tradition, Rome. Why Rome? Because if you want to change the world, you go to the capital, the heart of the empire. The place where emperors rule and ideas echo through marble halls. But here's the twist. The Bible never says Peter went to Rome. Not once. It's like trying to prove someone was at a party based on rumors and a half-eaten cupcake. Yet the church built its entire authority on the idea that Peter died there. And that's where the drama begins. Rome, 64 AD. The city is ablaze, 3/4 of it reduced to ash and panic. Emperor Nero, who fancied himself a bit of a city planner and a part-time lyre player, is accused of torching his own capital to make room for his dream project, Neropolis, the ultimate imperial makeover. But when the public starts whispering that Nero's urban renewal plan came with a side of arson, he needs a scapegoat. Enter the Christians. They're new, they're weird. They worship a crucified man and talk about eating his body and drinking his blood. Perfect candidates for public blame. And so begins one of the earliest persecutions in Christian history. But Nero doesn't just arrest them, he entertains the masses. He opens his private arena in the Vatican to the public. Thousands gather to watch Christians crucified, burned alive, and torn apart. It's like the Hunger Games, but with more incense and fewer sponsors. According to tradition, St. Peter is among those arrested. But unlike the others, he receives a special punishment, crucifixion. Not just any crucifixion, upside down. Why? Because Peter, ever the humble apostle, insists he's not worthy to die like Jesus. Now, here's where historians raise an eyebrow. Crucifixion is a slow, suffocating death. Upside-down crucifixion? You die faster, less spectacle, less drama. So, did it really happen? And here's the kicker. Latin historians of the time don't mention Peter at all. Not a whisper, not a footnote. The leader of the Christian community, supposedly executed in the most dramatic way possible, is absent from the record. Enter the Acts of Peter, a 2nd-century Christian text that throws a holy wrench into the traditional tale. It doesn't mention the fire. It doesn't mention Nero's Circus. Instead, it says Peter was preaching chastity to Rome's elite, never a popular sermon, and fled the city via the Via Appia. But then, plot twist, Jesus appears to Peter on the road and says, "Where are you going?" Peter realizes he must accept his fate and returns to Rome to face martyrdom. So according to this version, Peter's death wasn't part of Nero's fiery purge. It was a separate event, triggered by moral outrage and divine intervention. During the Middle Ages, the mystery of Peter's martyrdom location gets a new twist. A church called San Pietro in Montorio, built on the Janiculum Hill, claims to be the true site of Peter's crucifixion. Why? Because of a Latin phrase, inter duas metas, between two metas. For centuries, meta was thought to mean boundary markers in a circus, but medieval scholars realized it could also mean pyramids. And guess what? In Peter's time, Rome had two pyramids about 3 kilometers apart. Right between them, the Janiculum Hill. In 1445, the Pope even had Peter's crucifixion carved into the bronze doors of St. Peter's Basilica, with 2 pyramids in the background. Coincidence or ecclesiastical Easter egg? It's February 1939. Europe is on the brink of war, but inside the Vatican, a quieter drama unfolds. Pope Pius VII dies. In his will, he requests to be buried as close as possible to the tomb of St. Peter. A noble wish, but there's one problem. No one actually knows where Peter's tomb is. Enter Pope Pius XII, who decides to honor his predecessor's wish by launching a secret archaeological excavation beneath St. Peter's Basilica. And when I say secret, I mean Vatican-level secret. No press releases, no hard hats, just whispers in Latin and a whole lot of prayers that the 22,000 square meter basilica doesn't collapse like a badly baked soufflé. 7 meters underground, archaeologists discover a vast necropolis, a literal city of the dead. Mausoleums, tombs, inscriptions. It's like stumbling into ancient Rome's VIP graveyard. Then they find something curious, a small monument against a red-painted wall. It's simple, about 2 to 3 meters high, with columns on the sides. Emperor Constantine believed this was Peter's tomb when he built the original basilica in the 4th century. But there's a catch. It dates to around 160 AD, nearly a century after Peter's death. So is it a tomb? Or just a symbolic shrine built by early Christians to honor their spiritual rock star? No bones are found inside the monument. Cue disappointment. But then in 1953, enter the heroine of our tale. Margherita Guarducci, a researcher with the tenacity of Sherlock Holmes and the patience of a saint. She studies the graffiti around the red wall, cryptic scratches that look like random lines but are actually early Christian code. She deciphers phrases like "Peter, pray for me," and symbols like the P with a cross and keys, classic St. Peter branding. Then she finds a fragment of wall on the ground with the inscription "Petros Eimi," Peter is inside. That's the moment she knows. The bones must be here. Guarducci digs into the excavation records and discovers something wild. Bones were found in a hole inside the wall during the 1940s, but the archaeologists didn't think they mattered. So they boxed them up and, wait for it, put them in a cupboard. Yes, the possible remains of St. Peter, the Prince of the Apostles, were chilling in a Vatican storage closet like forgotten Christmas decorations. Guarducci retrieves the box and finds bone fragments, dirt, and golden threads. Because in antiquity, important people were buried in gold-threaded garments. The bones are analyzed and found to belong to a sturdy man, around 70 years old. Peter was a fisherman, likely strong, and died around that age. The pieces start to fit. In 1964, Pope Paul VI announces that the tomb and relics of St. Peter have been found. Vatican mic drop. But not everyone's convinced. The story of the cupboard sounds suspicious. The bones were found outside the targeted tomb. The skeleton is incomplete, and medieval coins were found in the hole, suggesting it had been opened before. So what happened between Peter's death and the construction of the monument in 160 AD? Did someone move the bones? Did they get redistributed like holy souvenirs? In 2014, archaeologists discover peculiar urns in Santa Maria in Capella, a church in Rome. Analysis suggests that Pope Urban II moved part of Peter's bones there during the 11th century. Why? Because relics were spiritual currency in the Middle Ages. Owning a saint's femur was like having the Mona Lisa in your living room. So yes, it's entirely possible that Peter's remains were divided, relocated, and enshrined in multiple places. The church only banned this practice recently. Back then, it was normal, even expected. So what do we know? A monument was built in 160 AD, possibly to house Peter's bones. Bones were found in a wall near the monument, wrapped in gold-threaded cloth. They match Peter's age and physique. Early Christian graffiti supports the idea that Peter was buried there. Some bones may have been moved during the Middle Ages. And yes, they were once stored in a Vatican cupboard. Is it definitive proof? No. But it's the closest we've come in 2,000 years. And whether you believe in the relics or not, the story itself is a testament to faith, mystery, and the relentless human desire to connect with the past.